Calaroga Shark Media.
The Vatican has announced that Francis's funeral will take place this Saturday at 10 a.m. in St. Peter's Square, an event expected to draw tens of thousands of mourners from around the world. This timing follows the traditional Catholic practice of holding papal funerals 4 to 6 days after death, similar to Pope Emeritus BenedictI's funeral, which occurred 5 days after his passing in 2023. This is White Smoke, the path to a new pope. The farewell to Francis begins Wednesday at 9 a.m, when his body will be transferred from the chapel of Casa Santa Marta, where he lived throughout his papacy, rejecting the more ornate papal apartments. A solemn procession will carry his remains through the Vatican's Santa Marta and First Roman Martyrs squares before entering St. Peter's Square through the Arch of the Bells. Cardinal Kevin Farrell, the Vatican camerlengo, who serves as the Church's temporary administrator, will lead initial prayers before the Pope's body is placed in an open coffin at the altar of confession inside St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican City. For approximately 3 days, the faithful will have the opportunity to view the Pope's body and pay their final respects. Images released by the Vatican show Francis dressed in traditional red and white vestments, holding a rosary in his hands as he lies in state. Meanwhile, memorial masses are already being held across the globe, from Sydney's St. Mary's Cathedral to Manila Cathedral in the Philippines. Flags fly at half-mast in numerous countries including Italy, Brazil, Lebanon, India, and Francis's native Argentina, which has declared official days of mourning. The funeral mass on Saturday will be presided over by Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re, the Dean of the College of Cardinals, and will feature simplified rituals that Francis himself approved last year, a reflection of the more down-to-earth, informal style that became the hallmark of his 12-year papacy. Among the changes, Francis eliminated the tradition of 3 nested coffins of cypress, lead and oak to streamline proceedings. World leaders from across the globe are expected to attend, with President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump already confirming their participation, likely Mr. Trump's first overseas trip of his new term. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and his wife Olena Zelenska plan to attend, as do European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa. Some of these leaders had been challenged by Francis during his papacy, particularly regarding their policies toward migrants and refugees. Perhaps the most notable break with tradition comes in Francis's burial wishes. According to his will, dated June 29, 2022, and released by the Vatican on Monday, he requested to be laid to rest at the Papal Basilica of St. Mary Major in Rome, rather than beneath St. Peter's with most of his predecessors. "I wish my last earthly journey to end at this very ancient Marian shrine," Francis wrote, noting that he had visited this church at the beginning and end of every apostolic trip he took during his papacy. Francis specified that his tomb should be in the earth, simple without particular ornamentation, and marked only with the inscription, Franciscus. He requested placement in the aisle next to the Pauline Chapel, near the Salus Populi Romani icon, to which he maintained a special devotion following Jesuit tradition. In being buried there, Francis wrote that he wanted to thank the Virgin Mary for her docile and maternal care. This decision makes him the first pope in more than 100 years to be buried outside the Vatican walls, joining 6 other pontiffs who rest at St. Mary Major. As the world comes to terms with the passing of Pope Francis, more details have emerged about his final hours. According to the Vatican, the 88-year-old pontiff died at 7:35 a.m. on Monday due to a cerebral stroke that led to a coma and irreversible cardiocirculatory collapse. His condition was further complicated by a previous episode of acute respiratory failure in bilateral multimicrobial pneumonia, multiple bronchiectasis, arterial hypertension and type 2 diabetes. The Pope's death came just 1 month after he was discharged from a grueling 38-day hospital stay. Dr. Sergio Alfieri, who coordinated Francis's medical team, had advised at least 2 months of rest, rehabilitation, and convalescence. He specifically cautioned the pontiff against group meetings, advice that Francis, driven by his sense of duty, chose to disregard. Despite his fragile condition, Francis maintained a surprisingly active schedule in his final days. Last Wednesday, he met with staff from the Gemelli Hospital to thank them for nursing him back to health. On Thursday, he visited Regina Coeli prison to meet with some 70 inmates, telling them he wanted to be close to you. When reporters asked how he was feeling, he replied simply, "As best I can." Then came Easter Sunday, when Francis appeared on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica to bless tens of thousands of gathered faithful. Earlier that day, he had met with Vice President J.D. Vance, who later wrote that he was happy to see him yesterday, though he was obviously very ill. The brief exchange between the two was cordial, despite Francis having previously criticized the Trump administration's immigration policies. In his final public appearance, Francis managed just a few words. "Dear brothers and sisters, Happy Easter," before an aide read his Easter message, which reiterated his long-standing concerns for the marginalized, particularly migrants and refugees. How much contempt is stirred up at times towards the vulnerable, the marginalized, and migrants, the message stated. As Francis waved, the crowd roared with approval, chanting, "Long live the Pope," unaware these would be among his final moments in public. Within hours of Francis's death, cardinals from around the world began traveling to Rome, not only to participate in the funeral, but to prepare for the momentous task of selecting his successor. According to church law, a conclave to elect a new pope will begin 15 to 20 days after Francis's death. The 135 cardinal electors, those under 80 years of age, will gather in the Sistine Chapel and cast secret ballots until a candidate secures a 2/3 majority. During this process, the cardinals remain sequestered from the outside world, taking 4 rounds of votes daily. When voting fails to produce a winner, ballots are burned with chemicals that create black smoke visible to those waiting in St. Peter's Square. Once a new pope is chosen, white smoke signals the successful election before the Dean of the College of Cardinals announces, "Habemus Papam," we have a pope, from the balcony. Francis's legacy lives on through the thousands of bishops he appointed and the more than half of the College of Cardinals he selected, many of whom will now determine his successor. He will be remembered for his openness toward the LGBTQ+ community, his passionate advocacy for migrants, his spotlight on climate change, and his efforts to reform the Church's governance. All accomplishments that reflected his vision of a more merciful, inclusive Catholic Church that serves the poorest and most marginalized members of society. As the Church prepares to bid farewell to this Argentine pontiff who asked to be called simply Bishop of Rome, Catholics and non-Catholics alike reflect on a papacy that sought to bring the Church closer to the people it serves and to heal divisions in a fractured world. Following the funeral, attention will turn to the conclave, the secretive process by which the next pope will be elected. The conclave, which must begin between 15 and 20 days after the Pope's death, has recently gained public attention through portrayals in popular culture, including the 2024 Oscar-winning film Conclave. While the film took creative liberties, it accurately portrayed many elements of this ancient process: the cardinal's seclusion from the outside world, the burning of ballots after each vote, and the tradition of smoke signals to indicate whether a new pope has been elected. When white smoke finally rises from the Sistine Chapel's chimney, it will signal the beginning of a new chapter in the Church's long history. Unlike previous transitions, this conclave appears without a clear frontrunner. Francis diversified the College of Cardinals during his papacy, making it more difficult to identify distinct factions. The cardinals will likely seek a balance between continuing Francis's progressive agenda and perhaps returning to more traditional approaches, while also considering expertise in international diplomacy. Among potential contenders, Cardinal Pierbattista Pizzaballa, 60, has risen to prominence despite only becoming cardinal in 2023. As the Vatican's top official for Middle East affairs, his experience in conflict regions has distinguished him. He would be the first Italian pope since 1978, though his international experience and avoidance of doctrinal controversies could help him secure the necessary two-thirds majority. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, 70, who served as Francis's Secretary of State since 2013, brings deep knowledge of Vatican operations and international diplomacy. Multilingual and experienced in delicate negotiations with countries like China and Vietnam, he represents a centrist choice with administrative prowess. Cardinal Fridolin Ambongo, 65, from the Democratic Republic of Congo, represents the growing influence of African Catholicism. Though close to Francis and part of his Council of Cardinals, he notably opposed Francis's 2023 ruling on blessing homosexual couples, illustrating the paradox that Africa's vibrant Catholic growth often comes with more conservative theological positions. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, 67, from the Philippines, nicknamed the Asian Francis, would represent another step toward a less Eurocentric church. His personable approach and experience with controversial issues like LGBTQ inclusion have made him a notable contender since the 2013 conclave. Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, 69, of Italy, embodies Francis's focus on serving the poor and marginalized. His connection to the Sant'Egidio community, work with migrants, and openness to LGBTQ Catholics position him as a progressive choice. Meanwhile, Cardinal Peter Erdo, 72, of Hungary, represents a potential return to the conservatism of John Paul II and Benedict XVI. His diplomatic skills and opposition to divorce communion and migration policies appeal to traditionalists. Lastly, Cardinal Anders Arborelius, 75, of Sweden, a convert to Catholicism, represents Catholicism's growth in traditionally non-Catholic regions. His focus on unity amid polarization could appeal to cardinals seeking a bridge builder. The ultimate choice will signal whether the Church continues Francis's progressive trajectory or pivots in a new direction.